You can sign as many as apply. As many as apply. Yeah. 60 seconds. Just because it makes me happy. All right, count your number of signatures. As you're sitting there, count the number of signatures you have. All right, was there anyone that was at least able to get 10 signatures? 10 at least. All right, cool. What were some of the numbers of signatures that people were able to get? How many signatures did people get? 15 signatures. 14. All right, anyone more than 15 signatures? 28 signatures? Oh my goodness, anybody more than 28? She like just trumps. Energizer Bunny, good networking. Let's give her a hand for getting 28 signatures. I want her on my Amway multi-level marketing team. Cool. So as you were going around the room and you were signing people's signatures, you were signing your signature on other people's papers and having them do the same. Were there things that you saw on other people's papers and you were like, oh, wow, why didn't I think of that? I should have wrote that down. What were some of those things you saw? Yes?
Time alone.
Time alone. All right. What was something else that someone saw?
Spirituality.
I heard spirituality. What was that? Computers and technology.
I
Yes.
saw freedom.
Freedom you saw in someone else's paper. Cool. One more thing that someone saw in someone else's paper, like, I should have wrote that down.
Education.
Education. Education. All right? So as you were also walking around, were there things that were more difficult to find someone to sign on, or you actually didn't find anyone to sign on it at all? Is there anything that was left blank on your paper, or difficult to find someone to sign on? Or you had the fewest signatures? Yes?
I put Africa.
Africa.
And this meant something to me, but I only have one signature on that.
All right, cool. So please raise your hand so when you were thinking about Africa, why did Africa come up to you?
It's the place that I felt most at peace and at home.
Okay, cool. So please raise your hand if you value having a place that you have peace with or that you feel comfortable in, if that's a value to you, if that is valuable. All right, wonderful. So it may not necessarily be Africa, but it is that same feeling that gets engendered. All right? What was something else that was difficult for people to yes?
So I had to, civility and interaction is very important to me. And then creating resiliency with Black families and families of color.
Okay.
And I had to point those out at the tail end, I had gotten no signatures, and I finally got to speak.
Okay. Cool. So if building resiliency, for all families, which would include Black families, is an important value to you, please raise your hand. If building resilience for people is important. All right, cool. Some people put both hands up. All right, cool. What was one other thing that was difficult to find someone to sign on, or it's the fewest signatures that you have? Yes. Making time for yourself. Please raise your hand if making time for yourself is of value to you, even if it wasn't written on your paper. All right, great. So, you all are very smart and intelligent and attractive people. What do you think is the point of this particular activity? What am I after? Why did I engage in this particular activity at this particular time? What am I after? To show similarities, right? And what?
Values.
Our values. So we can talk about our similarities. We can talk about our values.
Sometimes we word things differently, but we have to really dig a little deeper. There's a commonality there. And that by interacting with people who are different, I was reminded of things that I didn't do by myself.
Our commonalities and our differences. Right? So I know that I've sat in seats that you've sat in with presenters that presented in front of me, and oftentimes they talked about one aspect of diversity, but not both. So diversity really is, and you can write this down if you like, is really looking at our commonalities and our differences simultaneously. It's the recognition of our commonalities and our differences. How many of you have ever been hungry? Either physically or metaphysically or metaphorically hungry for something. You're yearning for something. All right, cool. How many of you have ever been in love? Raise your hand if you've ever been in love. All right, cool. Raise your hand if you've had your heart broken. All right, so we've yearned for something, we've hungered for something, we've been in love, we've had our heart broken. And please raise both hands if you've ever been the heartbreaker. For most of us, why is it that we're able to raise our hand or say that we've hungered for something or yearned for something, or that we've had our heart broken, or that we've been in love? Why is it that most people were able to raise their hands on those questions? Because it's a human experience. In many ways, we are very much alike. Simultaneously, we're also very different. And those differences are as important as our similarities. So what I'm yearning for could be cultural. Who I'm in love with might not necessarily be the same person that someone else is in love with. I hope not, because that gets messy. Right? What heartbreak looks like, what love looks like. Right now we're working on a project because we just took part stake in a hospital in the UAE. And so now we have to retrain our staff to really think about what it means to be an expat, so to speak, in an Arab country and in a relatively conservative / progressive Islamic country, right? And so, so that's important stuff to kind of think about because those things matter. We'll get to that in just a second. So at this time, I need to take a commercial break just for a second and make some more recognition. One of the things that's important for us to realize is where we are. And there are two things that are true about me every day that I wake up where I happen to live. I live in Rochester, Minnesota, and every day I wake up black. Every day I wake up black. And every day my feet land on Indian ground. Those are two truths for me that I have to be conscious of. So if I'm not conscious of those things, then I can be confused about my interactions every day as I walk around my prairie town of Rochester, Minnesota. So those are things we have to be mindful of. I'm also mindful of the fact that every time I walk into a door and I stand in front of a group of people, I walk into the room with privilege and with power. With privilege and power. I'm 6'2". I'm cisgendered, which means that my biology and how I manifest myself is typically, hopefully not atypically, but typically male. Right? I'm a conservative Christian. I'm not sure if I'm lower class or lower middle class. No, upper, lower, or middle, lower, right? I'm not sure where I am there, right? I have degrees behind my last name. I've matriculated through institutions of higher learning. I have the ability, I don't have a felony. I have the ability to marry who I want. I have 2 small children. I'm mildly attractive and extremely humble. So all of those things provide me privilege and power in specific and particular contexts. Privilege and power. And so if I don't recognize those things, both that privilege that I was born with and those that I accumulated, I'll get confused about how I show up in different spaces. And as much as I'm talking about my privilege and power, my real point is for you to think about your privilege and power. So where do you get privilege and where do you get power? But more importantly than recognizing what your privilege and power is, or trying to figure out where you got it or where you didn't, or if you got it, if you don't got it, less important than that is what do you do with the power and privilege that you have? What do you do with it? One of the most velvet kind of slap in the faces I ever got from a girlfriend was as she was kind of leaving and bags packed and was leaving, and she walked out the door and she said, "You have so much potential." That hurt more than anything else, right? I have potential. What else was she saying? What was the ... You're not living up to any of it, right? And so if you're not using your privilege and power, what good is it to you or anybody else? So privilege and power. All right? So when we talk about this idea of diversity, I really like to think about the concept of commonalities and differences, right? That we have to recognize both simultaneously. And there are lots of people who like to practice either or thinking, but I'm a both and kind of guy. All right? I'm a both and kind of guy. Any questions, comments, thoughts thus far? Cool, let's keep rolling. So, what we also must recognize when we talk about this idea of, so I'm going to introduce, how many people have heard the concept of cultural agility? All right, cool. So, cultural competence, how many people have heard cultural competence, right? So, I do want to tell you that I just used some really neat marketing ploys to be able to get here. So, I'll just be upfront and honest about that. I don't know if there really is a cultural competence 2.0. I'm not sure how that works. But what I do know is that I have more conversations that I want to engage us in. And hopefully they get us to that 2.0 place, right? And so cultural competence, think about cultural competence. So what is cultural competence? Yes, please, yeah.
Your lens of being able to see beyond what you're outside of your comfort zone.
Okay, so being able to see outside of your comfort zone, there was a whisper over here. Yeah. So it's something that you can never get to. So why do we do it if we can never get to it, right? Cultural competence, what is it?
Openness and acceptance.
It's openness and acceptance. All right. Yes.
Kind of like the opposite of ignorance.
So the opposite of ignorance, okay? Opposite of ignorance. I'm going to chew on that. Other folks? Yes.
Being aware of what other cultures experience and go through, and just having knowledge and awareness.
Okay, so having knowledge and awareness of different things, right? Cultural competence. So what's the nature? What are some things that make human beings human beings? What are some aspects of human beings that make us who we are? Yes.
We value certain
So we have values. So we value certain things. Yes.
The way we live.
Okay, so the way we live is important. So how do human beings live differently than our animal brothers and sisters? How is that different?
You value, just like you said, you value certain
Okay.
traits.
Okay, so we value certain traits.
We have certain attributes. We have certain attributes as human beings.
Okay.
You know?
So we have certain attributes as human beings. Okay, so let's do this. Yeah.
customs and traditions.
So customs and traditions. So as human beings, we have customs and traditions. All right, so I want to let you off the hook a little bit, right? So one of the things that's important to know about human beings is that we cannot know everything. Anybody know everything? Have you ever met somebody who thought they knew everything? They are annoying, right? Annoying. So one of the things about human beings is that we can't know everything. So the idea of cultural competence, that we'll never get there, or that is something that we'll never achieve, is a fair argument. That's a fair thing to recognize. And so I'm less concerned with your ability to recite the trivia of another culture, right? So this is how you handshake, bow at this moment, because those are rules. But if you don't understand the background or the principle of the rules, they don't do you any good. So I want you to be agile. So culturally agile. So we'll talk about cultural agility. So this is a picture that my family and I took a trip to Topeka, Kansas, and we went to the site of Brown versus Board of Education. Is anybody familiar with that case? Brown versus Board of Education. Why is that a definitive case? Brown versus the Board of Education. What did it do?
Integration
So, say more about integration.
of the education system for African Americans and white people?
Yep, so before Brown versus Board of Education, there was a law and a statute, as well as kind of a cultural norm that separate could be equal. So it's called separate but equal. Anyone heard that, right? So the restrooms, right, white and colored, separate but equal. What was the problem? It wasn't. And we also recognize that separate can never be equal. Just by the nature of the separation, it can't be equal, right? So this was set up by a context. And so it's important to recognize that the context, the environment that we're in, will set up how cultures interact and respond to those things. Okay? How cultures respond to those. So, we're going to skip that. If you'd like to get the full presentation, because there may be some slides due to time and I talk too much, and we might not get to, you can go to my website, Andre Koen, on the front, get the whole presentations at the bottom of the thing. So if you feel that you left out or missed out on something, it's there. So let's talk about culture. So what is culture? So if you open up your handout. So what is culture? So, culture is made up of two aspects. There's what you can see, and there's what you cannot see. The things you can see, we refer to those as artifacts. The things that you can't see, we refer to as values. All right? So, culture is context plus artifacts plus values equals culture. All right? So, what I'd like you to do is to pick, out of all of the groups that you are associated with, I want you to pick one of your cultural identities, and I want you to tell me what are the artifacts of that cultural identity, and what are some of the values of that cultural identity. All right? So, as an example, I think I mentioned earlier that I'm a Christian, right? So, what are the things you can see about me as a Christian? You can see that I'm kind. I may wear a crucifix, or I may not. I attend a church. Some of the values that you may not be able to see is that I believe in being kind. I give people the benefit of the doubt. I'll turn the other cheek. You know, if someone strikes me, those kinds of things. All right. So that was my example. You don't have to use my example. Feel free to use your own example. But what are some other cultural groups that people might belong to? So I just gave an example of one. What might be some other cultural groups you may belong to? Do people have cultural groups that they might belong to? I want to get so give me talk to me.
Where you work.
Yeah, so where you work could be a cultural group, right? What else could be another cultural group you belong to? Where you live. So where you live, right?
Can you see the human race in general?
Yeah, it could be human race, right? It could be specific ethnicity. It could be your sexual orientation. It could be a number of different things. So what I'd like for you to do is to just take about 4 minutes, and write down some of the artifacts and some of the values that are associated with your culture. All right? Some people might even say being American as a cultural group. What does that look like? What are the values associated with that? All right, I'd like for you to stop right where you are. And I know many of you are in a thought process. This is just a starter jar for conversations. But what I'd like for you to do is to grab an elbow partner and talk about your artifacts and your values associated with your culture. All right? So we'll give another 3 minutes for that, minute and a half. Four, three, two, one. So one thing I will encourage you to do is so I'm going to ask for people to share, but what I don't want you to do is to share someone else's story. what I'd like for you to do is to think about what you may have learned from someone else's story, and you can share that. But we get into problems, much like the Walker Art Center did when they put up the scaffold hanging thing, that they wanted to tell someone else's story without having a relationship with those folks, right? And we're referring to the Dakota 38 hanging that they were going to make a part of their art garden without having a relationship with folks, right? Or choosing to rename a lake that already had a name, right? Like in Minneapolis, like in Nebraska, right? So just be mindful of that. But I'm curious, as you were thinking about a particular culture that you chose, and you got to choose out of a myriad, because we're all parts of many different cultures. When you started thinking about the things that you could see, the artifacts, you started thinking about the values. Were there any relationships between the values and the artifacts? Did you see any relationships between those two things as you were writing those down? And what were those relationships between those things?
Talking about the unseen basic parts of things that we see.
So a number
They're
of
the basis of why we do
of-
those things.
So the basis of why we do these things up top is the deeper roots, right? Or roots, as my grandmother would say, right? So if I see a sister in a hijab, although it's a great fashion statement, it is also a statement of what? Of faith, of values, right? It is a statement of values. Did you know that the clothes that you chose to wear today are a manifestation of your values, right? Could you have elected to wear shorts?
Yeah.
Yes, you could have elected to wear shorts, right? You might have been against code, people might have talked about you, and it's just cold outside. It's not a choice I would make, but you have that as a choice. But you didn't choose that because of your values. So we have to recognize that when we see artifacts, particularly with the families that we're working with, that they're manifesting these artifacts because they are statements of value. I was the pull-up-your-pants police for a long time until I realized that it was a statement of values. And so instead of telling my students to pull up their pants or writing them demerits or tickets, and I even found myself doing it outside of school, that was a problem, but people responded. Like, anyway. So instead of doing that, what I worked to teach my students was when it was appropriate to have your pants sagged, right? So if you're in your neighborhood, you're out with your friends, that's appropriate. However, you may face challenges if you go to a job like that, or if you want to be seen in a different kind of way. You have that as a choice, right? You have that as a choice. So we have to recognize that artifacts are based on values typically that we don't see. Right? So how do you get to? So why is so nowadays you can eat both parts of the carrot, right? So you'll find that in salad, the tops in salads. But when I was growing up in the 70s, you only ate the orange part, the root part. How do you get to the root? How do you get to the root? You have to dig it out. You have to grab it, right? You have to work for it. So that's the good stuff. So how do you understand the values of a cultural group or of a human being? You got to work to get to that stuff. It's not readily or easily accessible, right? So it wasn't until I had Hmong friends that I understood that there were different kind of Hmong. There's green Hmong and white Hmong, right? I was kind of proud. I was hoping they would have a black Hmong too, okay, that's a race. Right? No, but only because I was able to have a relationship to ever get to that deeper meaning. Right? What is cultural misappropriation? Anyone ever heard that concept? What is cultural misappropriation? people raised their hand and said they heard that word before.
So what I think of is when someone takes and uses the artifacts of another culture without understanding the values of the context and the perpetrators of the claim.
And to whose benefit?
Their own.
Their own benefit, right? So, we appropriate stuff all the time as human beings, right? So some people will say, I'm so excited, my friends are here. So some people will say, cultural appropriation is bad. I don't necessarily believe that it's bad because we do it all the time. But misappropriation is when I take an artifact without having any relationship to the value of that artifact or to the people that artifact belongs to, and I use it for my own personal benefit. Right? So when you think about culture, when you think about appropriation, we do it all the time, right? Tacos weren't always fast food joints, right? But we appropriated that into our American society, right? So whether it's fine, good, or bad, it is what it is. So when we think about culture, so what is your culture? And so what were some of the cultures that people chose to talk about? What cultures did people choose to talk about? As you looked at your artifacts and your values, what culture did you choose? Being a mother as a culture. Give me three, just three. Being from a particular city was the culture that you chose. Someone else? Yes. Riding a motorcycle is a particular culture, right? Yes.
Just being mom.
Just being mom was a particular culture, right? Yeah. Anyone here not have a culture? Whew, okay, so we don't have to go that far, right? Because we all come from a context and we all have a culture. And now what happens if the context changes? How does that impact culture? So you have the mathematical equation. So if there's something about that one changes, does that have impact on artifacts and values? It certainly could, right? It certainly could. What if the artifact, something about the artifact changes? Could that also have an impact on this equation? Yeah, it certainly could, right? So what do we know about context? Is it the same all the time, or is context constantly what? It's constantly changing. So I need you to be agile, right? To be able to change with the context. There was a time when people did not believe that you could get kids to sit in car seats. Have seatbelts. Anyone have a little kid now? What do they tell you about the car seat or the seatbelt? My daughter's like, Dad, buckle up, right? You forgot to buckle. How dare you, And I let the little 5-year-old go for it because I think it's cute, right? Yeah. We can never recycle, right? So when does culture become a challenge? When does it become somewhat problematic? We'll talk about that in just a second. So what is the purpose of culture? The purpose of culture is to secure significance, belonging, and safety. The purpose of culture is for groups of people to find ways to get safety, significance, and belonging. Right? Significance says that I am a person with purpose and power. We are a group with purpose and power. So whether that purpose is something you decide as a group or as an individual, or something that the universe opens up for you and says, this is your calling, right? Either way, you decide, or the universe can tell you, right? So that's significance. We all are looking for a sense of belonging, right? Being connected, being able to be in relationships with people who understand my purpose and my power. That's the point of culture. And then lastly, we're looking for safety. Physical, emotional, psychological safety, right? So why do kids join gangs? It could be one of those three things or all three of those three things, right? Safety, significance, and belonging. Why do kids join 4-H? I would imagine it's the same three things, right? Why are we in the cultural groups that we're in, whether we were born in those or we selected those? Because they provide us some sense of safety, significance, and belonging, or at least we believe that they do, even if sometimes they don't. We believe that they do, right? So when families are coming to us for help, what are they looking for help to do? To be reconnected to one of these three things, right? Or a combination of those things. So that's what cultures are after. So I was in a training in Anoka, and a woman stood up and she said, "Andre, I have a question for you." I said, "Sure." And this is a crowd much like this. And she said, "I want to know, why are all the colored people moving into my neighborhood?" Guess what the audience did? Somebody did it just like those people, right? Yeah, they gasped. Why did they gasp? Why did they gasp? So she may have been saying what they were thinking for other folks. Yes.
We're told not to talk like that anymore.
You're told not to talk like that anymore. So people in the room, they were salivating. They were like, "Oh, Andre's going to get her. Oh, yeah, this is going to be good." And so I did. I did get her. I got her to answer her own question. And I said, I wasn't going to talk about the language part because that's a sidetrack, right? So that's a distractor. I wanted to get to the core of the concern. And I said, "Ma'am, well, why did you move into your neighborhood?" And she said, "Because it was safe and it was nice and it was da-da-da, and it was so-and-so and so-and-so." I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." I said, "Do you think other people in your neighborhood also believe that?" And she was like, "Yeah, I think so, da-da-da-da-da." I said, "Then why do you think those people are moving into your neighborhood?" She was like, "Well, I guess I never really thought of it like that." Right? Now, people thought I was going to get on this other thing, but I wanted to get to the root of the problem. I'm out of age, so next year I will be 50 years old. Right? I don't care about being right. I care about being effective. And so, yeah, I'll talk to her later about her language, but I want her to take this opportunity to learn something about herself and about other people. And even if it makes me look like I'm wrong or if it's embarrassing to me, my embarrassment is the sacrifice for her freedom. Now, all of us aren't called to that. I want to put that out there, right? But there are ways, and sometimes we want to be right more than we want to be effective. And so I challenge you to think about that. It's agile, right?
Do the right thing.
Do the right thing, right? And in the face of the wrong thing, because it's easy to do the right thing when people are doing the right thing back to you. It's difficult to do the right thing when people are doing the wrong thing or the mean thing to you. And I would say to you, that's just a test of who you are, right? So when people are disrespectful and da-da-da, whatever comes out of you is what was already in you. How dare them? I can't believe, oh, you can't talk to me that way. One of the things middle school taught me, I used to say that, right? You can't talk to me that way. Guess what? They already did. So yes, they can, right? So yeah, I had to get out of my own head. Right? So let's go to the bottom of page 2. And just really, I want us to think about the types of organizations that we want to build, or the types of lives that we want to have. Do we want to be ethnocentric or ethno-relative, right? Ethnocentric, centric, the core word there being central or center, and who typically is the center of our worlds? Us, right? So being very me-centered. Or do I want to be in relationship with other people, right? Do I want to be a relative, so to speak? You see the word relative in that second part. Right? And so many of you may be familiar with this methodology of looking at cultures coming from the IDI. Is anybody familiar with the IDI? the Intercultural Development Inventory. Many of us are, right? So this is an extrapolation of that. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, this tool gives a really good summary of that, so you're not left out. All right, so let's go to page 3. What I'd like you to do is to think about a time when you were in the in-group. When you were an in-group. Has anyone ever been a member of an in-group? Or how might one define an in-group?
A sense of privilege, access to resources that are not readily available.
Okay. Okay, so resources that might not be available to others, access, what else? In-group. What might be access to information that other folks may not have, right? So information, resources, that kind of stuff. Yes, please. Access to celebrity or the creation of a celebrity, right? All right, cool. So in-group, resources, information, knowledge, so forth. I don't know if anyone, attended, high school or whatnot, but there were the cool kids, right? What made the cool kids the cool kids? What
They were likable. Everybody liked them.
everybody liked them, right?
Yeah.
Except for me, I didn't like them because I wanted to be them, so I was envious of them, so I didn't really, but I could never be them because I didn't like them, so being envious of them never paid off for me. But I'm alive and many of them are not. So the popular kids, right? So oftentimes it's the jock kids or the band kids or the, or other groups, right? So those are the in-groups. So what are the features of an out-group? So if those are all the things that the in-group has, so they have access to information, to celebrity, to resources, to information, knowledge, what would be the features of an out-group? They are excluded from the in-group, right? They oftentimes are forced to look at the in-group and recognize that they can't have access to all those things for whatever reason, right? So let's spend about 2 minutes. I want you to think about this in-group and out-group piece of culture, right? So there are 4 boxes. So what are some of the thoughts of people in the in-group, right? So what are some of the thoughts of the in-group? What might be some of the behaviors of the in-group? And then what are some of the thoughts of the out-group? And what are some of the behaviors of that said out-group? All right, so we'll take just a couple of minutes and go through those. Give you 1 minute. Three, two, one. So what were some of the things that people wrote down for some of the thoughts of the ingroup? What are some of the thoughts of a so-called ingroup? Superiority. Confidence. Entitlement. Always right. Powerful. Any other features? All right, let's go down to the bottom. So those are some of the thoughts. So what are some of the behaviors of an ingroup? So oftentimes they can be bullies. They can be what? They can be overwrought. No, they can overreact. Okay? They can be exclusive. Active and outgoing. They can have a herd mentality. Right? Herd mentality. Cool, let's go to the other side. What are some of the thoughts of the out-group? So they may be perceived as being quiet, right? Or shy. What else? What are some of the thoughts of the out-group? It may be insecure, right? We know that if you're measuring yourself against someone else, you will always be insecure, right? What else? What's that? Original. They may feel original, right? So I'm not like that group. I'm going to be my own person. I'm going to do it my own way. Right? Maybe nervous. Why?
If you do something that would be outside of the norm and kind of,
Okay, so if you did something that was outside, so kind of the opposite, right? So not wanting to be the standout, but just being nervous about misstepping, right, in front of the in-group, right? I have a question. In your cultural group, in whatever culture you want to choose, are there features of in-group status that your cultural group has? Are there features there? Yeah. Do you also belong to a group that also has features of the out-group? Anybody belong to a culture that also has? So how do we navigate this space? How do we navigate this in-group and out-group space? You said carefully. Okay.
with openness.
With openness. Agility. Yes.
And I want to add patience.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to show somebody something different, they're not going to always accept it right away, right? You have to be patient with them. I can accept that and feel that out and otherwise.
Where does frustration come? So you talk about this idea of patience. When does frustration come when you're waiting on something? What's the root of that frustration? So first of all, what is patience? So you brought it up. What is patience?
Not putting a timeline on when something has to be done by. Like now, 3 months from now, it's just let it happen when it happens.
Let it happen when it happens. How many people can actually operate like that? I know I couldn't. My biggest frustration in the classroom was because I thought after 3 months they should have got this. Guess what? For some of my students, they didn't get it until they graduated from high school. Some of them are still telling me that they write me on Facebook and say, Andre, I just got it. I got it. You know, I'm like, you're 35. You got middle schoolers, but I'm glad you got it, right? So the kind of patience that we're talking about says that if they come back 1,001 times, we still have to smile and be gracious and patient. But not many people can do that. But the thing that's interesting about us is that we're called to do that. That's our job.